Well, basically, they cause a massive increase in insulin, which affects sugar and causes to go back into the cells and regulates your glycemic control, which regulates our appetite. They slow down the ability to digest, meaning you feel full. They work directly in the hypothalamus in the brain and limit your appetite. So you've got
we are going to start with our opening hook of Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro is what everyone is talking about right now. Are these a miracle solution, or are they just the latest quick fix?
Personally, I think that they could be a long-term fix. And I like seeing what is happening in our culture as a result of it. However, I'm also seeing the numbers that show so many people are stopping. So, the oral forms are starting to come out. Whether or not that will be more acceptable to people than lifelong injections, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's a quick start to get someone started with their journey to lose weight, but here's the problem. It's not sustainable. Some studies show as high as 60% are stopping within a year. They're stopping the medication. It's either cost or sometimes side effects, and the side effects can be just gastrointestinal problems, most severely sometimes gallbladder disease and pancreatitis. Those are rare, thank God, but my own experience has been with some patients on it that generally well tolerated for about a year. And then as you escalate and increase the dose, there's more side effects and it's harder to stay on it. The other problem is the insurances really do not want to pay. They find every reason not to pay with prior approval. And then if you switch insurance, it's stopped immediately. So there's a challenge. I think there's great potential here with the injectables are far more effective than the oral forms, but it clearly is not, it's not the answer.
One of my concerns really is, again, it's just something outside of the person. And when we look at motivation, you really have to look at what's going on inside. And what does this have to do with my future? To have it as a global look. And I think if they do that during the time when they start using it, that's important. Because as you said, as it goes on, the lack of motivation or the decrease in motivation really gets impacted. So we have to look at the bigger picture.
Right. So a great addition to the medical field to have these available. Absolutely exploited and abused now with spas and everybody prescribing them, compounds and things like that haven't always been as well tested. But lots more literature, I think, to come out to see the fact that patients can't stay on them. I mean, the reason high blood pressure medications work so well and Lipitor and cholesterol lowering medications is they're tolerable. These, at this point in time, appear not to be for various reasons. That's going to be a problem. So you can't really stay on it for a lifetime, though the drug companies would most certainly love that.
So before we get too far into this, I do feel we should talk about qualifications. That way we can get these on the books. If I'm going to start from left to right, just talking about why you guys find that you were qualified, why you wrote this book, anything kind of like that, just your background. So those watching can kind of have a little bit more trust in who they're listening to right now. So Frank, can you tell me who you are and what your background is?
Dr. Francis Battisti, background in psychology and human development. I was a practicing psychotherapist for 35 years and also taught at a university, part of the university system of New York, for 35 years in psychology. Work a lot with people on their health and the future of their health and really longevity coaching as time goes on. Probably my motivation was in my family. Obesity really had an impact on both my siblings and one of my parents. So that really has brought me to this field to work with them. And my area of research has been working with young children.
So I'm Dr. Helen Battisti, and I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist. I'm a retired professor from Marywood University and was in clinical practice for over 30 years, with Endwell Family Physicians, which is a medical group in Endwell, New York. growing up in an obese family and having grown up obese, kind of flipped over into some eating disorders in my younger years and then back out again and then into the field. I have a good understanding a lot of times of the thought process that many times people go through. And then having lived long and working more in longevity, I've already been through the childbearing years. I've already been through the perimenopause. I'm already in the menopause and learning how to maintain lean muscle, how to slow down sarcopenia, things like that. So I attended a conference, and there's only really one human starvation study because you can't get it by an IRB board anymore to starve people and see what happens. But it was done during World War II. And it was done by Ansel Keys, Dr. Ansel Keys, and he was assigned the job of how do we refeed the people coming out of all the famines that were happening during World War II. And so from his study and studying the people that participated, it really clearly defined that this dieting industry cannot work. If you restrict the calories down, we know what's going to happen. And so I think that's one of the problems. Anyway, so that's where I have always been in my career, is really trying to reverse and have a stronger voice, which is why I went back for the PhD. I didn't think my master's level was strong enough. And then fortunately, I ran into Dr. Terry, who had similar thoughts, and so appreciative of him listening. And yeah, that's it.
So, well, I was fortunate to have run into Helen and Fran. So we've been collaborating really for 25 years on this being the second edition of the book. So I'm a family physician involved in academia for the past 25 years and currently the Dean of LECOM at Elmira Medical School here. But as a family doc, here's what I've realized, that we're failing tremendously. Medicine is just reactive, and the focus should all be on prevention. And metabolic syndrome due to obesity is just prevalent everywhere. In fact, I think I just read something, you probably heard this, that more children now are obese than ever before. So despite every effort we made, the majority of children are now obese. And we know one thing, Christina, obese children become obese adults. So the whole focus of medicine, my focus, and with patients, and the reason for this book is prevention. And it's not necessarily medications, but just lifestyle changes, which obviously work. Here's why they work, because we have the lowest lifespan of any industrialized country by almost a decade. And what's the difference? It's not GLP-1s. It's not blood pressure medications. It's lifestyle. That's the reason for the book. That's the purpose. That's why we're here today.
Perfect. So going into this, there's really been probably over the past, I want to say, 3-4 years, there's been quite a height in this GLP-1 fanatic. Any idea, or like, have you seen a reason why this has become a thing? Because of course, obesity has been a problem for a very long time in America. Why the sudden burst of GLP-1s? Why is this happening? Why are people so going towards it?
I think it's easy. Just a shot, quick shot. You lose your appetite, you eat 2/3 less. It's simple. It's a quick fix that we're looking for.
So was it brought to us kind of heightened by celebrities? Were they the ones who kind of brought this into the light a little bit more? Where did this kind of come from is where we're looking at. Because it kind of feels like it just came out, you know what I mean? Like GLP-1s kind of seem like they just happened and now they're here.
Well, I think Helen can speak to that, right?
I was going to say, there's a lot, when you look at celebrities, there's a lot about body shaming and a whole big discussion about that. And I think it started to raise people's awareness even further. Once again, get the awareness of it. And the pain that people have when they're obese or when they're undernourished is just amazing psychologically. And so I think the papers picked up on it, the tabloids, the social media, and then people just get very involved in that. And it becomes something that reinforces it. And then it gets politicized. And that's a whole other thing that we're going through. And so I think all of that really makes it, at this point, one of the key elements that we're looking at, quality of health for our country.
Yeah, I also tend to agree with that. And I think people are trying so hard to be healthy and they want to feel good about themselves. And I think I use the amount of money that people spend. I mean, we're in the billions now on diet aids, on diet programs, on gym memberships, etc. People are trying. And so I think I was fortunate. Regional Clinical Research is associated with this Endwell Family Physicians where I worked, and we were one of the clinical trial sites for the Wegovy before it went to the FDA. And so I was fortunate enough to really see the effects and how that worked. And I think, much to what Dr. Terry is saying, it works. And I think people are just so desperate to try to improve their health. I don't think you would see the amount of money that people spend if they weren't. And this works. And I think it just, hit the highways.
Can you tell me, how does it work? How does this, so you talked about appetite suppression and not eating as much. What does these GLP-1s do to the body?
The hypothalamus in the brain, and limit your appetite. So you've got a drug that can work basically 5 different ways to limit the amount you eat. Probably most profoundly is in the brain. You don't get hungry. They affect the hypothalamus and dopamine levels, so you're just simply not hungry. And that's how they work. Now, mind you, that can be achieved as well, I would say, Helen, through lifestyle as well. This can be achieved through balancing your lifestyle, eating properly, sleep, and exercise.
And I think, too, it's important that people realize, not to the level of the medication, but we produce our own GLP-1s. And the way to do that is the stimulation of the large intestine and the colon with nutrients, which means we have to eat. So the more consistently we introduce those nutrients to our gut, the more GLP-1 is actually produced by our own bodies. Again, not to the level of the medication, but certainly if we start to adjust the lifestyle. And as a dietitian, I'm always harping on people, we need to eat again. Even if we just take, sometimes with my clients, I will take what they're eating. So I'm not adjusting necessarily calories or anything to begin with. I just spread it out through the day so that we know through direct and indirect calorimetry, if we eat, our metabolisms pick up. And so it's lifestyle. But one of the biggest, I think, fallacies now is the lunch hour. Who gets an hour for lunch? We're certainly not doing it in the schools or industry, or we just...
And one of my concerns, when it's lifestyle, we're in control. We might not realize, but we're in control. When the medication impacts our brain, we also lose that ability to enjoy our meals. And that's what meals really are for. It's to nurture our bodies, but also to nurture our experience. And how many times people like that social interaction. With the medication, sometimes you lose that social interaction because you don't have that desire. And that's one of the things that really moves us away from being happy. And ultimately, that's one of the things that people want, to be happy. So as we choose a lifestyle that's healthier for ourselves, we're more in control. And the more we're in control, the more we can make those decisions.
I think, speaking of that external control, what we find is when patients stop these medications, the weight comes on with a vengeance. They want to eat everything. Their appetite it's insatiable. And they immediately put more weight on. And that's the problem, because you fooled the brain, you fooled the body into you're not eating this for all the reasons doctors have said. And that's what happens. That's why it's long term, as a physician, very, very skeptical that this is the answer. I don't think it is. I think lifestyle is.
And I think it bears out in the Minnesota semi-starvation study that Ansel Keys did, because that's exactly what happened to the participants when they came out.
So in your book, you discuss about how to kind of do this in a more healthy way, to not become dependent on these GLP-1s, how to really work on your lifestyle. So obviously many people are going to continue to use these GLP-1s. Can we talk on to how they can try to start forming these more healthier lifestyles by using this, but then maybe eventually getting away from the medication so they don't just get hit with weight, that they can use this medication as a tool, but not as a overall solution?
Absolutely. And I I think that lifestyle has to go around the medication, as opposed to the medication coming around the lifestyle. So if we can use the time, and we did it in the actual clinical trials. So we started the clinical trials with them on, I think it was a Jenny Craig. So we dropped those calories really, really low. And then we introduced different dosing. It was double blinded, so we didn't know who had what, but you can kind of tell who had placebo and who didn't. And then what we did though was, so calories go down, metabolism goes down. Agreed?
Mhm.
So if you suddenly pull back like the medication, well, this metabolism is sitting here. Suddenly the appetite is back again. Well, it takes a while to get this whole thing revved up. But we can do it, but it takes time and it takes that lifestyle. So again, starting around the age of 40, sarcopenia, just the natural muscle wasting. Well, we know muscle has a higher metabolic rate than fat, so we have to stay with strength training. We have to, in whatever capacity, whether, young mothers are great because they've got it built in. They're picking up those babies every day. I mean, they're doing their upper body and lower body. But as those kids go away, they're not lugging the laundry up and down. They're not, and I apologize, I'm kind of being gender biased here, but yeah. So if we don't build the lifestyle around the drug, and then remove the drug, we're up the creek without an oar.
I think also we have to look at, again, that big picture, look at it for goal setting. There should be some goals set, realistic goals, achievable goals, ones that are measurable, and that we constantly look at it and say, are we still moving in that direction? Do we need to heighten our awareness? Do we need to lower our awareness? So there's certain things that we talk about, like there's no good or bad food. How many times you talk to people and they say, boy, this weekend I was really bad. What'd you do? Did you rob a bank? What'd you do? Kill someone? No. I had chocolate, and I got that just sets up, because what our mind says to us, our behaviors pull through. So that means also, what are we saying to ourselves? That I need to lose 50 pounds within 5 weeks before the prom. That's just a setup. It's one more setup. Doesn't maybe look at something from a health perspective. As I get healthier, I become happier. As I become happier, I become healthier. And those reinforcing those kinds of thoughts. So it's that kind of long view of the goal. And people, when they start a lot of these things, they're all excited. They let people know they're on social media. And then you can see they start losing weight. And then all of a sudden they kind of drop off. And a lot of times when they drop off, they think, well, the medication's not working. They look at something external and they may move away from it. That's the exact time when people need to step back and reflect and really cocoon. We like to call it cocooning. Cocoon for a while and say, what do I need to do to get back on the way I want to be? And then get back to it and really start. So the change curve doesn't go like this. It's always like this. And to realize that up and downs are just part of the whole process. And it's a lifelong process. It's not something that you achieve in 3 months or as soon as your enrollment, runs out. It's something that goes on throughout your life. And the last thing I want to mention is it's important to be around people who are also engaged in those healthy lifestyles. And that can be your form, because a lot of us are extroverts. We like to interact with others. So get around other people who are looking for the same kind of goal.
I would agree, and I think there's such simple things that patients can do to make it easier. One, the amount of time, limit your evening meal till around 5 or 6, so you're not eating, 2 hours, an hour before dinner. That immediately will result in weight loss. So number 2, exercise. Not necessarily a gym, just walk. Make sure you're getting at least 15 minutes, 30 minutes, getting your heart rate up a little bit. That can help. And I think number 3, getting the fact of some habits, just doing things the same every day and starting to form that could very much, those very simple things alone. And finally, sleep. We don't sleep enough. We're a sleep-deprived nation. Average American probably gets 6 hours or less sleep. That affects our appetite, affects the ghrelin levels in the stomach, and affects that you eat more. In fact, people who work night shift and such, they eat more. They're more prone towards metabolic syndrome and obesity. So those are simple things. Now, mind you, we haven't talked about a diet yet. We mentioned the idea of diet. We've seen some simple lifestyle changes that would absolutely result in in weight loss in and of itself. And it's no super fad, no super fasting or anything like that, just structure and such. And those are simple things that we'll recommend for patients.
So reading through your book, staying kind of in the medication, but necessarily not the GLP-1, I can actually attest that reading the book when I was starting to work with you guys, is that you also list taking looks at your medications and that certain medications that are in your everyday life can make an effect. One of those for me personally was citalopram, that I didn't know that it was not a weight stable drug. What is the importance of going and talking to your doctors about that? Because personally, I've now lost 15 pounds because I got off of that medication and went to another after being stuck at almost 200 pounds for a really long time and not figuring it out why, and it was a medication. So what is the importance of also looking at what you're taking? Because so many of us are on SSRIs and whatnot as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. Tremendously important. And doctors are entirely too ignorant of it. They give gabapentin for pain or seizures, but a lot now for pain, sometimes for addiction, like it's in the water. Everybody's on it. That's 20 pounds. And then we'll throw them on something for depression, an SSRI. There's another 5 or 10 pounds. And then while the depression's not well controlled, we'll put them on Abilify or another, a drug antipsychotic. There's more weight. The medications contribute tremendously. And I think you have to know the meds you're on, know their side effects, and ask your physician, hey, should I be on this? Is there an alternative? What is the alternative? Because the problem is, a lot of docs think once you're on it, ain't broke, don't have to fix anything. And we never are thinking, should I be taking? Our goal as physicians should be to be taking medications away as we get older, not keep adding and adding and adding. But that is great. And that I think is responsible for a lot of patients' initial when they start gaining weight, it's a lot of times medications are contributing, then it just continues each decade. They put on more and more weight. They've been on these medications. And even some of the common antihypertensive medications can contribute, and even some of the medications for asthma. So I think it's important to do a careful inventory of meds you're on. And yes, your doctor should know, but it's on you. It's your health. Look it up and ask. And now with AI, and with the internet, you can find an answer to just about anything you want.
Yeah, I was going to say that really is a shift from I'm responsible for my health rather than my doctor's responsible. My doctor is one of the resources that I have. My dietitian is another resource. My gym or my exercise person is another resource. My friend's another resource. But I'm still the center of that. And that puts the responsibility, and to me that means that I can make those decisions. But I need input from them. It's just a switch of the way we look at health and medications and stuff.
Wonderful. So kind of getting into that then, would you suggest, just as somebody who I've talked to Dr. Terry about this, I've gone through a lot in my life with eating disorders, weight gain, all of that kind of stuff. Something that really personally helped me was journaling and writing down what I've changed, what hasn't. Is there little tips that you would suggest, such as journaling or just tracking what you're doing to help people kind of start on this weight loss to see if it's my medications, if it's my diet, if it's my this? Is there little steps to kind of take with somebody who's really in their head that they can kind of help them get out of it? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Yeah.
I'll start.
You start.
Absolutely. Yeah. So whether we're journaling emotions, feelings, or we're journaling what our intake looks like. So, of course, as a dietitian, I'm always looking at what are we missing here in this picture, as well as their lifestyle. And so also recording what you're eating and going back to portion sizes. So I just did a post. We had some friends over, and I happened to still have my grandmother's good dishes. And she was born in 1895, something like that. So her plate is the traditional 9-inch plate. So I pulled out my mom. She's passed, and I have her, which I have no clue what I'm going to do with all this stuff. But
Everyone's.
Oh my Lord. So, but what I did was I put my grandmother's plate and my mom's plate, my plate when we first got married, and then the plate that I just, no, I beg your pardon, it wasn't the plate at that point, I'm gonna do that one, but it was the platters. So first my grandmother's platter, then my mother's platter, then my platter, and then the platter that I bought about 10 years ago from Pier 1. And I laid them all out and I took a picture, and it was like, oh my gosh, I mean, it's so silly. And now I have another one that I'm gonna post once I get all my plates lined up here that shows as the plate increases how the calories increase on that plate. And we know even from studies with dietitians who pride ourselves on knowing our portions, if we're given a bigger plate, even though we'll probably put smaller portions on than the average person or the non-dietitian person, we still put more on than what we thought. And so you go to like juice. People are always talking about how bad juice is. Well, if it's really juice and it's a 4-ounce juice glass, which you can't find anymore. So, you know, portions are so important. And so journaling and measuring again, not that you measure for the rest of your life, but to retrain your eye so that you don't accidentally overeat. So the bagel went from this size bagel, which is like an English muffin, to this size many years ago. And so many people to this day, I'll say, do you know that bagel is equal to 4 slices of bread? And they're like, no. And so the awareness and the knowledge from journaling what we're eating, I think is so important, so important.
Another technique is to step back at the end of each day and ask yourself, what did you learn new that day about yourself and about the world? And you start reinforcing it. The nuns taught me that in high school. When I was in trouble, they would always tell me, you need to step back and reflect. And I never knew what that really meant, but today I really understand that. Because that gives you a different look at things, and you can be just a lot more feelings of gratitude and stuff. And if we make mistakes, we're not bad. We just look at ways to overcome those mistakes.
I think also now we're blessed with these health trackers. These are automatic triggers. So on the Aura, if I happen to eat a late meal, I don't sleep well. And there's a little questionnaire like, hey, why did you not sleep well? Caffeine. Did you not fast before you went to bed? Did you have a cold shower? Whatever it was. Or did you have a heavy meal? These things are triggers, and they can be incredibly helpful. And there's various health trackers that give you insight in the moment. See, the key to changing health is in the moment changes. We can't just, when you see your doctor, oh, wait, what did I do? And speaking to what Fran and Helen have said, it's just you're controlling your own health. And I think that can help. But I totally agree with journaling. But things like the Oura Ring and other trackers, the Apple Watch, can give you insight into your health. And I think can have effect to positively modify lifestyle. In fact, they have. They absolutely have. The problem is these are not always readily affordable for everyone, and that is a challenge. These things are expensive. You're often paying a subscription fee, but it's a start to getting you more in touch with what you're doing on a minute-to-minute basis that's affecting your health. And I think it can radically change things from a lifestyle perspective as soon as it's available for everyone in some iteration. Would insurances cover? Be cheaper than a medication. Cost of some of these medications by simply, we would save trillions of dollars if people, lived a year longer, healthier.
So going into also more of that lifestyle change, education and whatnot, let's talk about learning food labeling and the nutrition labeling on the back. I just bring it back to me because it's easy for me to do this. That was a huge game changer for me, is really learning about how to read my nutrition label, that I can see not only the calories, but the protein, the fiber, this, that. What is the importance around that when you're changing your lifestyle, when you're working out, you're doing all of this, but it's also eye-opening when you learn how to read a nutrition label, that you're like, oh, this is something I should also focus on, because I was somebody personally that my ED came from using MyFitnessPal and doing that kind of stuff, but actually learning the portion sizes on those nutrition labels and what was in them made a huge change for me. Do you find that something beneficial for people to do in terms to change their lifestyles?
I do. Where do you even begin? But so I'm thinking first of all, comes the serving size on your label is really important to look at, because a lot of times people will just pick up, a 16, 20 ounce bottle of juice and think, oh, this is a serving, and just drink it without even thinking. But when you look at that food label, you can actually start to see that all that information is based on a specific serving size, and then how many servings are actually in that container. Now, the manufacturers have the ability to manipulate many of our products. So I always refer people to PAM. If anyone uses PAM, they'll see everything is 0, and so they're all using it. But if you look at the serving size, it is, and correct me, I think I've got this right, but anyway, it's less than a second. So it's like a quarter of a second spray is the serving size. Quarter of a second spray. It's like, and that's what they're able to then label their nutrition. So there can be some manipulation, and so that's why it's so important that we look at that serving size. Once we know what we're looking at, so how many grams of protein do I need? How many grams of carbohydrate? So when I'm working with someone with diabetes, I will outline for them, we call it a consistent carbohydrate diet. And so they need so many grams of carbohydrate consistently ingested throughout the day. So using that food label, they can look right to the carbohydrate content and see exactly how many grams are in it. Same thing with fat. Trying to keep cholesterol down. If I have a woman who has heart disease or high risk for heart disease, I try to pull the saturated fat down to about 12 a day, 12 grams. They can find that on many of the food labels. If not, AI will build them a meal plan that will certainly keep them. And again, I support the use of AI tremendously. And men, I try to keep them around 18 grams of saturated fat, so that too is shifting them in their lifestyle from going from butters and things like that to integrating some of the other fats. Because I don't like to use the word healthy fats, because saturated fat is important to our health. It's just a matter that our culture, we got too high in saturated fat and then dropped our activity level. So I think I really like the food label.
And there's apps now, much simpler than that. You put the app on, it says good food, bad food. And that is so simple, and it's free. And you can just put it on the label, bang. Yeah, I've been using that quite a bit, and it makes an enormous difference in the food you buy and the portion control. And it is, at the end of the day, calories in, calories out, period. That's a lot of it.
Again, talking about those resources, that's what we're talking about, external resources to help with that internal process. It's important to make sure you know the quality of those resources. With social media, everyone can come up and say, have a diet if you twirl on twice, you'll lose weight, and those kinds of things. You really want to look at the resources that you choose and ask the people that you work with, your doctor, your dietitian, your psychologist, whatever, to be able to, is this a good, reputable kind of service that really makes sense? Because I think with this whole process that we're talking about and people not being healthy, there's such anguish that comes from trying something and it sets us up to fail. And so then it's really hard to get people to motivate, to really feel like they can really have some impact, some positive impact on their quality of health. So you want to make sure the information you have is good information, and it's reputable information, and scientifically based information, not just because someone thinks something.
Now, before I move into my next question surrounding the book, Helen, I noticed you kind of cringed back a little bit when he said good food,
Good, bad.
food. Talk to me a little bit about that, just because, again, I relate everything to myself when I go through this. I've had to train myself away from this whole good, bad food, because no food is necessarily bad for you. In my brain, that I've made it that it's all about the portion I'm eating of it, how much I'm eating of it, so on and so forth. That's a really big thing to people as myself, that it was very mentally a bad thing for me, that I would see a donut and I'd be like, I can't have that today. That's going to throw off my entire week, so on and so forth. But then I just learned one donut is not going to kill me today as long as I don't eat the entire box. That's not a bad food because it's making my brain happy. It's putting those happy chemicals in. So tell me why you kind of cringed on the good food, bad food.
Good, bad.
And that's nothing against you, Dr. Carey, because that is, it's, everyone is different. For some people, it doesn't affect you to hear good food, bad food. But for somebody that grew up thinking foods are bad, it was very difficult for me to overcome that.
Yeah, so I will say I do like those apps because I think it does give people just kind of a heads up. if you break any food down, I don't know in which order to present this, but if you break any food down in a lab, which is what they do every day for the food label, you will find that there's nothing more than the basic 6 nutrients that we have as far as the macros, and then our vitamins, minerals, water, etc. And it's always the same. So we do have what I call trigger foods. And trigger foods are foods that you can't stop where you intended. And different people have different trigger foods. And so in that sense, they're not good or bad, they're just unique to us. And in the research, we've been able to show in lab rats that the rats will work equally as hard at the little lever, to get the reward, for a combination of carbohydrate, fat, and salt. So you put those 3 things together, and the lab rats will work equally as hard at that lever as they will for cocaine, for heroin, for meth, because when they do the MRIs, the pleasure sensations are lighting up the same. So there is an element, this is purely theoretical at this point, that are the manufacturers able to now make our foods kind of in an addictive quality? So for some people with those trigger foods, we have to be aware of them. And those apps sometimes can be really, really helpful. So if someone has, trigger food is a potato chip. Well, is a potato chip bad? No. I mean, it's a white potato, which is not bad. It has sustained Ireland and Russia for thousands of years. Oil versus a fat, which is solid at room temperature, and we know we need fats and oils in our diet. And salt is sodium chloride, 2 of the key electrolytes that we have. So how come each individual thing is fine, but when we put together as a potato chip, we suddenly think it's bad? It's not. Just break any food down to its nutrient content. And much to what you were saying, it's all about the balance of nutrients. And push those trigger foods aside, it really boils down to taste. So we know the single most important factor in if someone stays with dietary changes, does it satisfy their unique taste based on cultural backgrounds, ethnic, whatever. And just as you alluded to, if a donut is not your trigger food, that you're going to have one and then you want to eat the whole dozen, enjoy the donut, because it's, there's nothing wrong with it as long as you balance out your day or balance out your week. I like to look at week views of things more than day by day. So that's why I cringed at the no good or bad, because I think for most people, I used to do this, especially with kids. I used to love to do it. Tell me your good foods, tell me your bad foods, and then tell me where your favorite foods are on the bad list. But the kids would say, the good food was the ice cream, the blah, 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 and the bad stuff was the broccoli. It was really cute to see the difference. But yeah, so that's why I cringed.
I think as long as, and I agree with Helen on all of that, it's just trying to make things simple. It got to be very simple. When you're shopping, what could you do in the moment that would make you make this choice over that choice? What would be a little bit healthier? And this app also speaks to a lot of the chemical additives that are given. But I do believe that there's great potential with that in, what people choose, their choices. And particularly, those on, getting food stamps or something like that, they're often making food choices which aren't the healthiest. And they say cost, but with this app, potentially they could buy an alternative, which might be better and, more conducive to better health. And I think that's where these can play a role.
So dancing around all of this, let's really dive in quick to the Tomorrow's Way book. We talked really heavy at the beginning of this about GLP-1s, and now we've talked about food labels, everything else. Who is Tomorrow's Way for? It is the no diet way to weight loss. So we haven't really talked too much about dieting here, if that's something we maybe want to get into, but who is Tomorrow's Way for? Who did you guys really make this for? What is this? Is this a tool? Tell me a little bit about the book.
I think it's for everyone. Everyone. Everyone struggles with weight. I mean, we're living in the United States, 77% of the population is either overweight or obese, and more than half of children are obese. So I think this could apply to older adults, younger adults, children, families.
It also is, it's really bite size. You know, the chapters are not long, gives you a little information. Then we have reflective questions to give people some ideas, and then some little activities for them. And in the back of the book, you have 13 modules to really look at. You can utilize this process, excuse me, whether you're working with a professional or not. So it's really open, as was mentioned, and I see it more than a diet book. It's not a diet book. It's more about health, and all of us need to be concerned about our health. And I do a lot of work with the Myers-Briggs type indicator, which looks at individual traits. And so it's important also to look at the various traits. So if someone is more of an introvert, they may find the book really helpful for themselves. If they're more of an extrovert, they might want to buy the book and then share it with others and have a little discussion around it. Not around food, but just have a discussion with it.
So this book isn't just centered around those that are taking GLP-1s. This is for anyone and everyone that is on a healthy lifestyle journey, that they're trying to better themselves.
Yeah, and wants to live longer, because what we basically talk about in the book promotes longevity. Weight loss, lifestyle changes, better sleep, eating habits, exercise. Exercise alone is about the only thing that evidence has shown that makes you live a day longer. Exercise and diet and weight.
We also, I think it's important to note that we first published the first edition of this book back in 2005. And then we got together again, I don't know how long ago it was, maybe 3 years ago, and started saying there's a lot more now.
Yeah.
And the medications, and now but the book came out long before the GLP was even, on the horizon type of thing. The other thing, too, that we've used this book for a little while, I was an adjunct professor at SUNY Broome, and I was teaching a 1-credit phys ed course, and I used it as the textbook. So those 13 modules in the back are actually, because this semester are 15 weeks, I use it. So it's also in a very easy presentation, a great explanation of what is a carbohydrate and how much should I have, and what is a protein and a fat, and vitamins, minerals, water, all that type of thing. But then I know you probably know, I know you know this, but it was something new to me, was as far as sleep, I was reading, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, that we have the glymphatic system, and at night when we sleep, I shouldn't necessarily say at night, that is how the neurons get washed and clear all the metabolic wastes, which maybe, it still isn't 100% proven, a contributor to Alzheimer's disease, because they see the plaque and the tau and stuff building up when you don't get a good wash on those neurons.
It eliminates those senescent cells that die, that as they build up lead to cognitive decline and Alzheimer's, which certainly baby boomers, that's the number one thing they don't want to have.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so this plays a role with that as well, this kind of lifestyle changes that we recommend.
So the focus really is this shifting of an idea of who's responsible for my health. What can I do for that? The Blue Zone research, where they looked around the world for people who lived well into their hundreds, and who lived in their hundreds quality life, not just on some, in a nursing home or something. They looked at a number of issues that people practice, which we really include in the book. And key to think about is they didn't do those things to get healthy. They're healthier because they do those things. And that is really the basic shift that we need to keep in mind. And I think when people are thinking about motivating themselves and looking at the bigger picture, it's like, I can do this. I might not know that today, and I'm working on that, but the more I do this, the more I can reinforce that issue, that mindset.
Wonderful, and we'll end on, so the title is Tomorrow's Way, the No Diet Weight Loss. Let's talk about diet and how, I think a really big topic, always is dieting, the fad diets, everything like that. There's the whole, heroin chic is coming back currently. How it's really about not just going on a quick fix diet. Quick fix diets it's like the GLP-1s, it's a quick fix right now. Can we talk a little bit about, kind of further into shifting your lifestyle, that, I don't know if you want to talk about how either quick fix fix diets don't work, how quick fix diets can kind of be a jump start, just into the diet culture if you want to, just your thoughts about diet culture, changing your lifestyle, so on and so forth.
Well, let's not recommend diets for all of the reasons Hella said. You may lose initially, but it's not sustainable. And numerous studies have shown that. In fact, she mentioned the Ansel Keys study show that. Let's promote lifestyle. Let's promote the book. Let's talk about lifestyle instead of doctors always will glibly give a 1,500 calorie diet, 1,200 calorie diet, and none of those work. And that's why the diet industry and diet books are so successful. There's about a 99% failure rate on every diet. So I would just say we don't prescribe those. We prescribe lifestyle changes, as we've spoken to in the book.
I agree 100%. And I was trying to think, at one point in a presentation I was giving, I think in a class, I made up a slide that took the years on the bottom, and then it took the different diets, and it just shows, it doesn't matter what diet was prevalent at the time, the weight just keeps going up. Weight keeps going up. So I think almost all diets work as long as you can stay on them. The problem is you can't stay on them. They're not sustainable, period. And I think the proof is in the weight of America.
And I think, again, by changing lifestyle, by really endorsing a healthier lifestyle and trying to define for yourself what that means, you're really doing away with the shame. I mean, shame is so major in this issue. And so when people go on a diet and they don't make it or whatever, they don't make their point, there's just this shame and anguish that occurs. And that's something that really concerns me. It doesn't really help people accomplish anything. It just puts you deeper into a regressive, depressive hole.
Anything that I didn't touch on with you guys today that you really wanted to?
I think you covered a lot.
Yeah.
I just want to bring up culture. So my big thing is our culture. If we're going to be healthy, we have to go counterculture, because we don't even have sidewalks. Urban sprawl that happened during the 50s and 60s, quite by accident, made it impossible for people to walk anywhere. The fear of children being kidnapped pulled all the kids in off the streets. We got rid of crossing guards. They have to get bussed everywhere that they go. I always say, if I could pick up somebody and stick them in the heart of Italy, up in Fran's family's hometown, their weight would change because the culture changes. So we all, before the Industrial Revolution, we all had dinner, which is the larger of the two meals, midday. And if we do that, food is the number one appetite suppressant. If we eat, obviously we're not hungry. So when people eat during the day, their hunger is down at nighttime, and that lighter meal, which is supper, suffices, which helps with gastric reflux, because people are eating, I always tell them 3 hours, I think that's still correct, before you go to bed, to try to cut down on that. It helps with your sleep, but everything in our culture, even our language, as Fran was saying, what we say. Some of my research I did in long-term care, because the statement was, let them eat, it's the last thing they can enjoy. Except when I looked at the MDS Plus data, we were getting younger and younger and younger coming into nursing homes. And it's like, if this is a healthcare facility, like, we're actually making them sicker by, like, desserts at every meal. I mean, we were required by the state to serve dessert at lunch and dessert at dinner. So I think our language needs to, our culture needs to change. And I do believe it's us that will change it as we start demanding more things. One of the things that I really like about the GLP-1 is that it has forced manufacturers to alter how they're producing, because people aren't buying as much junk food as before with the GLP-1, which is like, okay, no, this may be one, but culture, I think, is critical in this whole dialogue as far as helping people be successful.